Good evening, everybody. As we begin this meeting, I'll ask that all present please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind council and me that our procedure bylaw forbids the use of mobile devices during committee meetings. It is 6 p.m. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll begin this evening by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. This land has a rich history and forms part of the Gunshot Treaty. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous peoples and express our gratitude for the opportunity to live, work, and learn on this territory. We commit to honoring and respecting the land, its history, and its current stewards as we strive to strengthen our relationships with Indigenous communities and work toward right relations together. A motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the February 26, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be approved. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of council, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. If there's any discussion on cemeteries, I am a member of the Trinity St. Andrews United Church Council, and Trinity St. Andrews is the owner and operator of the Hilton Cemetery. So I will be recusing myself for that discussion if it happens. We have no delegations this evening. Madam Clerk, are you aware of any citizens' comments?
Sorry, Mayor Ostrester?
Yeah,
I was kind of waving at you at the end there.
go ahead.
With relation to pecuniary interest, I thought that we had already voted as a council on that item. I suppose, do I need to declare again for the full package?
Because it's in the package. I don't think we'll be talking about cemeteries, but I need to, and so
So then
you
I
go
will
ahead.
therefore say that I am the landlord from Gift from the Heart, which is part of our grant and aid package. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before I move along? So there are no citizens' comments this evening, which brings us to staff report, the 2022 draft budget. CEO Castleman, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start with a correction to the handout that you received on Friday. It relating to a chart on page 15, and I trust that you've gotten a handout this evening to correct that. The change basically is a restatement of the 2023 budget for the library. And we're always striving for accuracy. And that's something that we noticed late in the day. So we've corrected it accordingly. Nothing turns on it as far as this year's levy. Okay, with that, the purpose of tonight really is to follow up with further discussions and deliberations relating to the 2024 operating budget. We last met on January 29, and we discussed about a half dozen or so issues. And I thought that I would just review those issues to let you know what we did about them and what the impact to the overall tax rate was. So let's start there and I'm going to refer you to page 6 of your handout. And that is dealing with all of the changes that have been made to date from the first meeting that we held way back in November up until January 29th. And what I wanted to do was highlight a few of these because I know it's important to council to move forward with some of these projects.
Sorry, CEO, it's page 4, everyone.
Page 4, page 6 on mine, but oh yeah, it is page 4. Sorry. Good catch. I'm looking at page 6 of 39. I missed the 4. Okay, so I wanted to give you some highlights with respect to some of these changes that we chatted about on the 29th. One of the issues we talked about was climate action plan and financing of that plan. And in addition to that, we went from $90,000 to $100,000, and we've capitalized that item in its entirety. So you'll notice a small amendment to the capital budget of $100,000. From an expense standpoint, that's being financed by two sources. $35,000 from the contingency reserve and $65,000 from 2023 carry forward item. So as council had wished, we're getting on with that project, financing it accordingly, but from a capital perspective and not an operating perspective. So you'll see a corresponding reduction in the operating budget of about $65,000 or so. The second item is with respect to the ASE program. And there is some discussion with respect to whether we had financed or even contemplated the purchase of some capital items. And I'm referring to cameras, a couple of cameras. And we've quantified those two cameras and the ancillary items that go along with them at about $75,000 or so. Once again, we've capitalized that particular item and we're financing it through enhanced revenues in the operating line. So you'll see an enhancement on the revenue line of $75,000. It's now at $230,000 from previous amount that was discussed on the 29th. And the $75,000 is being capitalized in our capital budget. So as discussed, and the wish of council was, let's get on with the program, let's finance it accordingly and push forward as quickly as we can. So those are a couple of items that we wanted to just clarify. There's some updates with respect to some of the external budgets. Lower Trent Conservation Authority has submitted a higher budget than what we initially anticipated. It's gone up a little bit. We've also made some internal adjustments to the budgets reflecting year-to-dates. Many of the budget numbers were put together based upon year-to-dates of July of 2023. And as time goes along, we get smarter. And when you have the end of year-to-dates, we've taken a second look at those and made some adjustments, particularly in the public works area and in the IT area also. We talked a little bit about back in January. I had a session with council where we chatted about some organizational changes and some recommendations in that regard. And as you can see, we've financed those and shown the financing associated with those of about $170,000 or so. We've also spoken about the compensation reviews for both the non-union group and for the council group. And we've itemized those for your view. The next item is dealing with the, if you recall, the original operating budget included an allocation of $50,000 towards accessibility in the downtown area. And following a lengthy discussion that we had on the 29th, the council had decided to delete that item. So we're showing the deletion of $50,000 in that regard. We've also listed all the grants and aids. And those are decisions that were made, I think, back on November 27th or so. And the only thing I'll highlight for you is you still have a residual to allocate if you so choose of in or around $36,000 or so. So keep that in mind as time goes by throughout the year. From on occasion, different groups come forward and request funding from council for a variety of different issues. And we purposely try and have a residual so that you've got some money to deal with important issues as they come forward. So generally speaking, those are some of the highlights. We also got some good news with respect to general insurance. It had gone down, and we've reflected that in a $52,000 reduction in the overall operating budget. So that's some good news, quite frankly. Beyond that, those are the highlights. The overall budget from a municipal perspective has gone, I think it was 7.06, 7.08 the last time we chatted. And you're seeing a reduction in that overall operating budget. It's now down to overall increase of 6.58 for the municipal portion. And so what we've done is we've said, okay, well, the taxpayer pays three portions of the tax bill, and the tax bill is broken down between municipal portion, the educational portion, and the county portion. Well, we now have all that information. So what we've done is we've taken that information and we've come up with a blended rate. The county portion is about 6.57. The education has remained static, and the overall blended rate is about 5.84% for the taxpayer. And we've tried to quantify what does that mean in your pocket on page 6, and you can see it's about $80, a little shy of $80 of an impact. Next, really on page 7, budget timetable. The timetable is really up to council at the end of the day. In the normal course, if we are lucky enough to wrap things up tonight, there would be a motion and a recommendation from the committee of the whole to council for their consideration of the 2024 budget. And in the normal course, we have a public reading or public consideration of the budget at that time. So depending on how things go tonight, we may be in a position to plan for that meeting in the not too distant future. I would think that we could probably go forward as quickly as the 4th of March. Beyond that, reserves really haven't changed. To and fro from reserves really haven't changed beyond what I've already spoken to you about with respect to the climate action plan and how that's being financed. I'm just flipping here and trying to focus on the changes. You can see on page 14, the residual amount that's remaining for the grants and aid is actually $36,225. And you'll notice some adjustments certainly in the fire budget and in the public works budget. Both have gone down. I mentioned to you that insurance had been reduced by about $52,000. For simplicity, we took half out of the fire budget and half out of the public works budget, just for simplicity, quite frankly. Beyond that, the team is here ready to answer any and all questions.
Thank you, CAO. Are there any questions for members of council? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I've been thinking quite a bit since our last meeting about the question of that downtown revitalization $50,000 that had been a recommendation from the accessibility committee in order to try and help local business owners to make downtown more accessible. And the discussion we'd had last about that was that we have an existing program and that we probably shouldn't try and start a new one while we have an existing one that's underutilized. And so that was the way that our discussion went. But as part of that discussion, it was pointed out that we've never actually contributed any funding to that existing program. So we have a community improvement plan specifically for the sake of promoting affordability and accessibility downtown. And there's no money in that account. So I love seeing that $50,000 savings on the budget, but it strikes me that we don't actually have a program if we don't have any funding for it. if we were almost prepared to dedicate that funding towards accessibility, and then we said, well, let's defer that because we have an existing program, seems to me it might be wise for us to devote that funding to that program. As I understand it, then that would just sit in a reserve until there were applicants for it. And we can have discussions about how to promote CIPs so that people will actually access that funding. But I don't like having programs that are functionally non-functional because they lack funding.
Any comments, CEO?
Really? Is that okay? Really, yes, we had a fulsome discussion last go around. Following discussion, council decided to make a reduction in the overall budget. Council decided to make a reduction in the overall budget, trying to recognize that we have accessibility issues ourselves. Are we fully compliant ourselves? The answer is no. Are we on the right track? The answer is yes. So with our own accessibility and the requirement to get there by 2025, we're not there yet. And if we're going to fund projects, we should be funding our compliance to the accessibility requirements firstly. And then secondly, if you have a residual, sure, you can start helping out from here to there. So I think that was my recollection of the discussion.
I think everybody understands that. However, if we have a CIP program, but it's not funded, what would happen if someone applied for funding in that CIP?
Well, couple things. We've got a CIP that deals with a number of different issues, and I'll try and remember them and rhyme them off for you. One is brownfield, one is accessibility, one is affordable housing. Those are three that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure I've forgotten some. We've funded the overall CIP program to the tune of, I think it's $20,000 for the last couple of years, and we've embedded an additional $20,000 in this year's budget. So we have some funding that is available. With any CIP program, anybody can make an application, and there's different components of the CIP program. Some are expenses that are incurred right away. Some are expenses that are incurred over a period of time. So the outflow of money doesn't necessarily always happen from a municipal standpoint all at once. Typically, it's based upon incremental taxes that are gained as a result of the overall development. And as such, the savings to the ratepayer comes over time. And so the financing comes over time. So, you budget accordingly and you spend what you spend what you budget. The reality is if there's a shortfall, a couple of different things, you can always open up the budget again. Nobody likes to do that. Or you can we often get approached from time to time dealing with a variety of different issues. And you know what, if it's not in the budget, we look to typically reserves. And we have a fairly healthy contingency reserve. And if there's a special project that council deems of merit, you finance it accordingly.
And is there a plan to promote our CIP program?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely. I'm meeting with a couple of participants tomorrow. I'm meeting with Mr. Hagerman and Mr. Walsh, and we're talking about a number of different issues, but certainly the game plan for 2024 for each one of them, and part and parcel of that will be the CIP program and getting feet on the ground and getting going with it, and getting the applications in place so that people can come in, read about it, understand it easily, and make application if they so choose, and we promote it accordingly. It's a worthwhile program in my view, and we need to get going on it. So that'll be two initiatives that I'll be chatting to the two managers and department heads tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeldon has a follow-up.
I do, thank you. Agree regarding wanting to make sure that we fund our own accessibility first. I think that I know that our staff are working diligently on tracking down the remaining places where we lack accessibility here. I also know that they've had some sagas in terms of getting funding and dispersing it accordingly. How aggressively are we funding our own internal accessibility requirements?
CAO.
I think that I'll just make some general comments here. The reality is that we have many mandated programs by the province and or the feds. Accessibility happens to be one of them, with a mandate of my recollection is it's 2025 to be prepared, and we've been budgeting and financing accordingly. And we've done an assessment of all of our facilities to identify weaknesses in that regard. And we're working off that document. It's not too old. I think it's a couple of years old or so. We're working off that document to come up with our capital plan on an annualized basis. So we're chipping away at it. I think you know, we've done our homework with respect to here's the assets that we have, here's the weaknesses associated with those assets, and let's get a game plan on a go-forward basis to deal with those problem areas. So I think we're being pretty aggressive in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Butwell. No? Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to the CEO, thank you. Mr. Castleman, I'm delighted to see that you have ASE in there. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Just to address Councillor Wheeldon's concerns, my recollection is the same as the CAO's. Our last discussion, it was unanimously decided that we should focus on municipal accessibility issue first. It would be nice to reach out beyond the community, but to some extent, the out-of-town landlords have to want to do something. I don't have the same concern about funding as perhaps you have, and that's perhaps as a result of my kind of intimate involvement with ASE. And I know the sort of funding that it can generate, so I don't see us having a cash issue, providing we execute that program expeditiously. So I understand. I sit on the same accessibility committee, Jeff, so I understand their concerns. I think the funding will be there if we do the other thing first. Let's make the money first before we spend it, is I guess my view. Just to follow on, Mr. Castleman, there's a line in here, incremental short-term accommodation revenue. Does that relate simply to license renewal, or is that the start of MAT tax collection?
Mr. Castleman.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Walsh and or Mr. Hagan.
Director Walsh.
Through the mayor to council, yes, that my understanding that's for the renewal of the licensing fees for short-term accommodation. I think the MAT tax is a different would be a different line than that. That's specifically only for short-term accommodations. MAT tax would apply to short-term accommodations and motels, hotels, and other forms of tourist roof tourist accommodation.
Thank you. Do you have a new question or follow-up? Go ahead.
Thank you for the clarification. So I guess my follow-up question is, and I think CEO, we've talked about getting a presentation sometime in March with an update on STA status, and in particular, MAT tax. Do I understand that correctly?
CAO.
Through Mr. Mayor, certainly we had that discussion back on January 8th, and I think it's important that council and the community is apprised with respect to where we are and what needs to happen between now and collection of the funds. So it's an important project. And our intention is to try and get a report in front of council as soon as we can.
Do we know what as soon as we can looks like?
Well, we had a staff meeting this morning. We've got a fairly aggressive meeting coming up on the 4th. But we've got a couple of meetings scheduled for this month, 18th and the 25th. So we'll try and make it happen at one of those meetings.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to go to the downtown revitalization for a second as well. Because if I understand correctly, I don't think the downtown revitalization portion has yet got new policies around it under the CIP. Am I correct in thinking that? I just want some clarification. I know it was something started years ago, but then there was kind of halted and I don't think it was ever finished up. Am I correct?
CAO.
Again, I'm going to defer to Mr. Walsh.
Dr. Walsh.
Through the mayor, Councillor Emily. The yeah, in short, the CIP policies that were adopted recently approved by Northumberland County, who approves our OPAs or official plan amendments. It was approved August 24th, if my recall is correct. And so those policies are now operational, notwithstanding budget allocations and some other administrative matters. But specifically to downtown revitalization, yes, we have a policy framework now.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, and through you to Mr. Castleman, CEO Castleman. Last week, we, as council, voted on the compensation piece for councillors. And in reviewing these figures, I was wondering where the healthcare spending amount is, which would be approximately $14,000. And where also we can find the increases to the per diems for both councillors and committee members.
CAO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the health spending account is not financed. That was discussed, I think, just last week or so. And we knew that we're going to have a follow-up with council tonight. And I think I had indicated in my report that it was not budgeted, not financed. So if that's something that you'd like to turn your mind to this evening, great. We have an estimated cost of implementing a program of that nature. Happy to share that with you. I've done some preliminary information or preliminary research. Haven't dealt with it knee deep, but I have a sense of what the cost would be. So it's not financed right now. So you want to turn your mind to that. As far as per diems are concerned, with the various committees, they should be embedded within each committee. If you go through the various committees, you should see stipends or per diems for each in each committee. Same thing applies to the council members. And I think what's unique about council is, and if you recall this, there was a recommendation to go from a base amount of $60 for a 3-hour session to $75 for a 4-hour session. So in my view, I think it's going to be a bit of a wash, because from time to time, council goes over the 3-hour amount, and all of a sudden you're moving from $60 to $120. So by having that 4th hour, I think you're going to negate a number of those doubling of stipends. So I think, in my view, it's going to be a bit of a wash.
Okay, I asked simply because when I was looking at the committee amounts for 2023 and the budgeted for 2024, they didn't appear to change. So is that just because you figure that we might go over one time, but it's a $15 hit versus a $60 hit? Okay. So it's not actually necessarily reflected as a separate item, and we don't have a separate line item for that 14,000 plus administration and taxes liability.
The health benefit.
The health benefit, sorry. Because I understand,
Correct. We have nothing for that.
we have nothing for that. Because as I understand it, we did have that. There was a bylaw a couple councils ago for this, that nothing ever happened. So there was no line item for that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and what I've tried to do is I've tried to get some corporate history on that particular issue, and have spoken to our finance director, who's been here about 20 years or so. And while it might be in place and named in the bylaw, it's never been there's never been a demand for it or an ask for it, and or financing of it in the 20 years that she's been here. So until I saw the bylaw the other day, I was not aware of it. I've been here 5 years. So, you know, if we want to get on with it, great. You know, the compensation review spoke to that issue, but made reference to you may want to give consideration to something like this in the future. Well, the future could be tonight, you know, and so the reality is that 7 members of council, the amount would be provided through what I'll call a carrier. And there's some taxes and administration fee that goes along with it. So let's say everybody used $2,000, that's 7 times 2,000 plus the taxes plus the administration. So if you wanted to implement something like this, it's about 16.5 or so in around that range. So that's something you can turn your mind to this evening if you like. You guys can debate that and make whatever decision that you like, and we'll record it accordingly.
Thank you.
And just the CEO and I had a brief conversation about that health benefit that was in the bylaw from 2018. I don't recall where it came from. I was on that council. I don't recall any discussion about it. I don't see it anywhere in a compensation review, and it's not contemplated except for maybe in the future in the current compensation review. So I think council needs to turn its head to what do we do and should we do at the end of the day. Councilor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to CAO or Mr. Puffer is here. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify the line also to do with council salaries, because I'm seeing an increase to council salaries on page 4 of 31,163. And then on page 16, council expenditures, a change of 60,871. What else is in that line to make up the 30 some odd thousand difference in that?
I'll through you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
I'll answer part 1 and maybe look to Mr. Puffer or our HR manager for part 2. So certainly we talked about compensation over the course of the last month or so. And if you recall, I was before council on January the 8th and also on December the 18th, or maybe it was the 20th, I can't recall. Time goes by, too much fun. And anyway, I've been in front of council on a couple of occasions dealing with the compensation review. And the compensation review was completed for the year 2023. And there was a recommendation in 2023 to go from A to B. And there was a residual gap. And that gap was about $30,000 or so. And in the normal course, we inflated that for 2024 purposes by 3%. And that's where you see the amount of 163 on page 4 of this document. So that's number 1. And beyond that, hit me with question number 2 and what the line number was.
Page 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down, council expenditures. I'm making the assumption that that's where our compensation comes out of. And I noticed that the difference between 23 and 24 budget was 60,871 for a 25% change. And I couldn't reconcile the 31,000 to the 60,000. So I'm just wondering what the difference is.
To be fair, I don't have that information. I don't think anybody on the team would have that this evening. I'm looking at Keith. I would doubt very much that he would know what the residual is. Happy to provide that information tomorrow. I don't think it'll take too long to figure that out.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Bob, it was the incremental expenditures associated to increased seminar participation for council members. I think that there was a sizable investment in participating in some of the training and learning opportunities presented to the council through seminars. That's my recollection.
So that constitutes at least part of that extra $29,000 that we're speaking about tonight.
Yes, that's my understanding. I could confirm that, but from my recollection, there was dollars there for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Puffer. Would you please confirm that by email to all members of
Yep,
council?
for
Thank
sure.
you.
Thank you.
Councillor Fredis.
I can't find the note in here, but I thought I read that also in that line is the charge for the integrity commissioner. And I gather this council has been a little more active than previous councils in reaching out to the integrity commissioner to seek advice on items. So that's contributed somewhat to that differential.
If that's true, that makes sense. There are an awful lot of invoices that come in from the integrity commissioner that I see. We confirm that though as well, Mr. Puffer. Thank you. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you through you to Mr. Puffer. Perhaps we could just get a breakdown by account of that total number. I'm sure there's a spreadsheet somewhere for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. I know that we've already basically approved the grants and aid. I was kind of looking it over again, and I'm going to go back for 2 seconds to the Retriever Club. One of the smallest requests we had, yet we sliced it by 50%. I know for some it's not important, but I still see it as something that brings revenue and interest into our community. And whether or not we want to kind of bring it back to their original ask of $1,000, I was wondering if my colleagues had any appetite to kind of add to their request.
Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to Councillor Rowley, I'm sorry, but I don't have an appetite. Because it opens us up to the Lawn Bowling Club and a whole bunch of other stuff. And we worked long and hard to try and get this budget to a number that it generated what I think is a reasonably palatable increase, tax increase for residents. I guess my other view is the Kennel Club can be doing some things on their own to promote their stuff, and perhaps should be.
Councillor Rowley.
Well, I'm sure that they do. Their next trials are coming up in early May. It's a great time to have more people come visit our community. There's dollars spent locally. And as I say, I think, we've certainly cut by percentages, certain requests, but this is the only one that we cut by 50. So I think we could be a little bit more fair and just give them part of the other 50 back.
Anyone else on council agree with Councillor Rowley? I hate to say it that way, but go ahead, Councillor Fredis.
So if I understand Councillor Rowley correctly, you're looking from 500 to 750? I can live with that.
Head nod, 3 head nods. Should we do that by way of motion? I've got some here. Motion is moved by Councillor Rowley, and I'll need a seconder that the grant and aid request for the Pine Ridge Retriever Club be increased to $750. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fredis. Discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Let's talk healthcare benefit for members of council. Go ahead.
Thank you. I've made a circle here about the, I'm going to keep calling them BERU, Bright Marine Rescue Loan Forgiveness. Perhaps council could remind me, did we talk about the loan forgiveness and eliminating the loan forgiveness? I seem to recall we had a conversation that we would no longer be doing the loan forgiveness. Does anyone else remember that?
I think we reduced it significantly. There was a $15-ish thousand request and we brought it down to 3.
Okay,
That's my recollection.
thank you.
Councillor Fredis?
Through the chair, my recollection is the same as yours. It started out as a $15,000 ask plus 3,000 for the docking. It was a fairly extensive conversation. And basically what we said is we're not into loan forgiveness, but we will offer them some relief and granted them 3,000 with the promise that next year will be just as emotionally charged of discussion.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? We do need to talk about this health care benefit for members of council and whether or not to add that to the budget. So it would cost $16,500, and if there's a want, I will draft a motion. Councillor Rowley?
Thank you, Mayor. During our last discussion regarding the council compensation review, there was a lot of us concern with the increase that we were already getting, and maybe we should just leave the $2,000 for another time per councillor.
That's certainly the recommendation from the compensation reviewer, that it should be another time, but Councillor Fredis?
I would endorse kind of leaving it to another time. My understanding also is that these sort of health coverage plans can be done kind of on an insurance basis where you pay so much per month so that you're not front ending the entire amount. So a $2,000 policy could cost you $250 a year sort of thing. So I think it may be appropriate that CAO and the Director of Finance be looking kind of at that avenue rather than looking at it from the point of view of front ending a whole $14,000.
That way councillors who wanted to opt in could opt in, and those who didn't want it could opt out. Yeah, fair enough. Councillor Butwell?
Whichever way staff would like to go about looking at that, I'm more than fine with. I do think that it will remain a liability on the books, and so we should at least have a line item for it, whether or not we put 14, 16, or we put 0 in. It draws our mind to, we need to look after this in one way or the other. It seems that 6 years ago, something was done and not looked after. So I don't want it to get lost through the cracks, because I know at least one councillor at this table, not myself, did try to make a claim for it and was told it didn't exist.
So I'm going to have it moved by you that council direct staff to include a health benefit for members of council. Should we add a number to that?
I don't think I have a number that I could add. I don't have experience in insurance, so I'm not qualified to do so.
The CAO suggested it would be 16.5 if it was to be front-ended by the taxpayer. Councillor Rowley?
Thank you. I have a question. Based on Councillor Butwell's comment regarding trying to access it already, is that because there was no money there for it, or is it because the bylaw or the policy is not clear yet?
I think it was in the bylaw, but there was no policy, and I think it was unbudgeted as well, but that would, if there was a policy that existed, the money would be found to deal with it. CAO,
That's exactly right.
thank you. Council Wielden?
Thank you. Further to our discussion from last week, I think that at the very least by next term or before next term, so that it's known before the next election, we should have something like this in place. Because again, this is one of the barriers to participation in civic government, civic life. Even today, I received a threatening text message, that kind of thing. If this policy already existed, I would be using it right now. So I think that in terms of reducing barriers to participation, it behooves us to ensure we at very least have a policy. I think that the amount that we're talking about tends to be the amount that the CAO and sometimes the mayor will say we can find somewhere. I'm not sure the amount matters so much as ensuring that we have a policy and that it could be accessible if needed.
So it's moved by Councilor Butler that council direct staff to include a health benefit for members of council to the 2024 budget. I'm not putting a number in place. Is there a seconder? Discussion? Councilor Ferretis?
I wonder if, forgive me, Councillor Botwell, if the motion shouldn't be more like council asks staff to go out and look at the various funding mechanisms for this health account and then come back to with a report. Because again, I'm not so sure that it's necessarily a requirement to put up the whole 14,000. It may just be an insurance thing with more moderate monthly costs. I mean, I knew when I sold my business, $100 a month and I could get unlimited health coverage and hospital benefits and all that other sort of stuff. So yeah, there's lots of insurance companies that offer those sorts of policies.
For $100.
Hmm? Yeah.
I don't think we should be debating possible values of insurance company.
Well, what I'm
offers.
saying is that there are, I believe, insurance vehicles around that can provide this sort of coverage without having to upfront the entire amount.
And
And all I'm
no doubt
suggesting is-
our group insurer would have may have some sort of
Yes, and
opportunity available as well.
I'm just suggesting we evaluate those before we come to any conclusion.
CAO?
So to assist me in understanding what council wants, I think you need a bit of a placeholder here, because I don't know whether you want a 5-cent program or a $23 program. I don't know. So I think I like the idea of sending me away or sending staff away to do some homework and coming back to council and saying, here's 5 different programs, here's different ways of financing them. You can go ahead with ABC or whatever one you want or not. It's up to you. So we need to do a little bit of research. But if you get to a point where you like one and you haven't budgeted, you're still in the same jackpot. So what I would suggest is that you put a placeholder in place, pick a number. It's going to be the wrong number. So just pick a number for a placeholder and we'll move forward accordingly. But I don't think it's a good, if you put 0, it's going to be 0. And I'm going to be right back and saying, here's 5 different programs. Which one do you want? You haven't financed it. So that would be my recommendation.
Councilor Wielden?
Is it appropriate then to say that we want to put an upper limit of that 16,500 with the hope that he can find something more affordable for the taxpayer? But that would facilitate the getting something in place.
Or we could add that includes a $2,000 benefit for each member. And then have staff report back on what that looks like. Does that work, CAO? Because that's what the current bylaw says, right? As the mover, are you okay adding that last line as the seconder? Is there any further discussion on the motion? Those in, Councillor Rowley?
Could you read the motion, please?
I can. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council direct staff to include a health benefit for members of council to the 2024 budget that includes a $2,000 benefit for each member. Councillor Butwell?
Thank you very much. I have no issue with the way that's reading. Seeing that we were deficient in a budget and a policy, would it be appropriate then, either as part of this motion or a separate motion, to direct staff to develop a policy as well? Because it seems there were two black holes last time.
It might be appropriate to direct staff to report back to council, and that report would then
Generate a
also generate a
policy?
policy.
Okay, thank you.
And further, the staff report back to council. That's what I've added. You okay? You're okay? Any further discussion?
One more question.
Yep.
So, based on the report we get back is whether or not we would approve adding the $2,000 per counselor, or we're going to do it anyway.
I think that this would generate an addition somehow.
And
Well,
so-
this doesn't actually, this motion doesn't do anything to the budget because we
Right.
don't know. We don't know what we don't know.
Right.
So
Until we get a report back, we won't know what exactly the number is or whether or not we approve
right.
any report coming
Right.
back from staff. Thank you.
Anything further from members of council? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. All right, back to the 2024 draft budget. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Fredis?
Through the chair, thank you. I have one little tiny question. I'm looking at the reserve sheet now, if I can find it again. But there's a reserve here for parking for $450. Now I gotta find the page. Okay,
It's 6:55. Councillor Rowley has left the chamber.
yes. Yes, page 9, reserve fund, parking, 450.28. Could you explain to me what that is?
$450.28 for a parking reserve fund. CIO?
I don't have the answer this evening. Happy to find it out and report back to council as early as tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Councilor Wright?
This may have been mentioned last year, but I don't recall it. What is doubtful accounts?
CIO?
I'm not a guru here, but I'll give it a wing. Mr. Puffer, you can jump in here. The reality is that we have what I'll call supplementary and write-off accounts. And we try and collect 100% of the taxes and or the fees that are owed to the municipality. And from time to time, there are some doubtful accounts that you end up writing off for whatever reason. And it could be a fire, could be a demolition of a property, could be a number of different issues. And those issues are outlined in the Municipal Act with respect to certain provisions that allow for the writing down or writing off of certain taxation. I don't recall I used to know the number. I think it was 357, 358, 359 of the Municipal Act, but that likely has changed. But yeah, that's what doubtful accounts are for. And, you know, we have a few of them, And, you know, we've got some brownfields within the community, and that's certainly a doubtful account in my view. So we don't have a lot of them, but we have some of them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, do we anticipate with the current economics that that account might grow then this year?
Like, I can look to Mr. Puffer, but my experience in the 5 years that I've been here, and the economy's been up and down a little bit, is it's fairly static. People are, we've got a good group in this community, and to a large extent, people pay their taxes and their bills, and if they're having a tough time, they talk to us, and we try and tackle one account at a time and work with people on payment plans or whatever, but pretty good group, I think, in this community.
Any other questions, Councillor Fredis?
Through the chair to CEO and I guess the chief. On page 13, it talks about the internal borrowing for the new pumper truck. So I guess my question's got two parts. First off, it talks about 10-year useful life, but Chief, please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding on a pumper truck is it's 15 years useful life frontline duty, 5 years secondary. Is that number kind of correct? And if it is, what does that differential between the 10 and 15-year useful life have in terms of financing costs and arrangements?
Chief?
So through you, the mayor, yes, you're correct. It's a 15-year plus 5. So that's a typo.
But the loan would be over 10 years.
I can't answer that. Director Whitterfield would. I don't know
You don't
that.
know, yeah. CEO?
I'm just going to jump in here with, and I can do a tag team either with the chief or Mr. Puffer. The reality is that we all know the environment that we're in. We have higher rates. The rates have been bumped up over the course of the last, I don't know, couple of years or so. So we benefited from a municipal perspective with low rates for a long time. And we took advantage of that, quite frankly, and the rates have gone from, 2 point something up to 5 point something. And we're anticipating, based upon the policies of the province and the feds, that the rates are going to come down. And so we've purposely only dealt with some temporary funding, and the fire truck is one of them, where we're not locking in long-term. We're borrowing internally until we see the rates drop, and then we'll lock in accordingly. But so we're doing that on a couple of different projects. You saw the fire truck is one of them, and I think that our director had mentioned one other project. I can't recall it off the top of my head, but there are a couple of projects that we just wanted to take a temporary look at it, temporarily finance internally. And then when the rates start to drop, which I anticipate will be late spring-ish, we'll start turning our mind to looking at longer term financing. So the quick answer is, to help out the fire chief here, is that useful life of the different vehicles, we've got that fairly pegged in our asset management programming. And so there's certainly a useful life, 15 or 20 years, depending on the vehicle type and whether they're front line or second line or second history. So the bottom line is what the fire guys do, and I don't want to speak for the chief, but what the fire guys do is you run them hard for 10 years or so, and then you put them in the back country to use them as a backup vehicle, generally speaking. So that extends the useful life over a period of time. Typically, we will, my experience with the big vehicles, they last 15, 20 years, 25 years. Would probably take a mix of about 20 years or so on average and finance them accordingly. But all depends on the usage at the end of the day. Some last longer, some not so much.
You give him a chief's helmet for his retirement. He thinks he knows everything about the fire department now. At the end of the day, what we've included in the, you want to do a quip? You can do a quip.
We have to have some levity, have
Fair is
to
fair.
have to have a little fun. So I was talking to a friend of mine from Brockville, and his son is the deputy chief down there. And my friend was saying that the deputy chief took on a polar dip in the St. Lawrence River to raise money, $100, and he was in the water for way too long. I heard something about 16 minutes or something crazy like that. And he was in a bet with the deputy police chief to see who would last the longest. And I think a young lady from the paramedics lasted the longest.
I don't think anybody's surprised by that at the end of the day. So regardless of this useful life in brackets, the $700,000 at 5.45 is over 10 years and is 91,640 per year in borrowing costs until such time as interest rates come down and we can get better external borrowing rates. Anything further from members of council? So before we added the $250 to the Pine Ridge Retriever Club, we were at 6.58%. And Mr. Puffer, I can't imagine that $250 bounces that number at all. Or does it? You're not running an ongoing spreadsheet? Yeah, $250 isn't gonna touch it. I will confidently say that $250 is not going to bounce that rate of 6.58% at all. So, council, are we comfortable making a recommendation to council for the 2024 budget with a 6.58% tax increase? So I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to council to approve the 2024 budget with a 6.58% tax increase. And I've only added the number 6.58%. Otherwise, it is as you read it. Is there any discussion?
Is there a
Councillor
reason,
Rowley,
is there a reason why you wouldn't add the blended rate to that motion?
because, well, I can, but
Because it
that's,
just sounds good.
but other than because we only have command and control over our own budget. And the blended rate happens because of what other people do as well as us. So I don't think it's appropriate to add to our motion since our budget is our budget. Anything further from members of council? By all means, Councillor Rowley, if you want to go out there and talk about the blended rate, and feel comfortable doing so, you go right ahead.
I know, like I said, it makes us sound good. It makes us look good maybe, but I mean, that's what the taxpayer is paying. They're paying the blended rate. They're not paying our rate. They're not paying the 6.5, right?
And when I get interviewed tomorrow morning, I'm going to get asked about both rates and what's the blended rate. But I will speak to, I can speak to both budgets, so I will speak to both budgets and I will speak to the blended rate. But tonight it's 6.58% for Brighton. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion's carried.
Like a recorded vote on that.
I almost signed it. Almost signed it. Madam Clerk, a recorded vote has been requested by Councillor Rowley.
Councillor Emily Rowley,
Yes.
Councillor Jeff Wheeldon,
Yes.
Councillor Bobby Wright. Yes.
Yes.
Not working.
Counselor Ann Butwell,
Yes.
Counselor Byron Ferrettis,
Yes.
Mayor Brian Ostrander.
Yes. Please tell me we budgeted for a new mic system.
Yes, we did.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. That motion is carried. Is there anyone in the gallery who has questions with anything that appeared on tonight's agenda? Madam Deputy Clerk, is there anyone joining us by Zoom for that purpose? We have no in-camera session this evening. It is clock's wrong. It is 7:06 p.m. This committee of the whole meeting is adjourned with my thanks to everyone involved in getting us here. All senior staff, CAO, and in particular, Deputy Treasurer Puffer, who took on a difficult task. We appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. Safe driving home.